Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I want you to picture something for a second. It's 3 a.m. You're lying in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, and the decision you made, like 3 weeks ago, is just playing on a loop in your head. You've turned this problem over 100 times, and you are literally no closer to an answer. You're completely, undeniably stuck. Well, if you've been there, you are definitely not alone. So today, we're going to explore exactly how to restructure your problem-solving approach so you can get unstuck a whole lot faster.
So what is it that actually keeps us awake at 3 a.m.? Because honestly, everyday annoyances rarely do. I mean, if your car won't start, or you have to deal with a super angry customer, or even an overdue bill. Look, those things are stressful, sure, but they don't usually trap you in this endless cycle of sleeplessness. Why? Because your brain's autopilot just takes over. It handles them because the next step is familiar. But genuine problems, the real heavy ones, those hit you when your autopilot completely fails. A major financial decision goes sideways. A relationship starts showing real cracks, or you get an unexpected medical diagnosis. The stuff that usually works, it changes absolutely nothing here, and suddenly you have no idea what to try next.
Now, the reason we get stuck like this is almost never a lack of effort. It's actually just a symptom of how our brains are wired. The economist Herbert Simon called this bounded rationality. And simply put, it just means the human mind has hard limits. Our working memory is pretty narrow, the information we have is almost always incomplete, and time is usually running out. So when you put an already overloaded mind under pressure, it starts taking shortcuts. Simon called the most common shortcut satisficing. Basically grabbing the very first option that looks, good enough, rather than digging for the right one. And here's the kicker. Trying harder doesn't fix this at all. It actually just asks your already overloaded mind to carry an even heavier burden.
So to fix that overload, we literally need to move the work out of our head and onto the page. Let's look at an example. Picture a pediatrician examining a toddler who has a fever and a strange rash. Her autopilot instinct, which is totally driven by the high pressure of the moment and wanting to guard against the absolute worst-case scenario, might be to jump right in, perform an invasive lumbar puncture, and admit the child. But the rash has this one specific characteristic. It actually blanches when pressed, and that gives her pause. So instead of just blindly acting on instinct, she stops, she relies on structure. She writes it down and checks a formal diagnostic protocol. And by doing this, she realizes the protocol actually doesn't support an immediate puncture at all. Boom! She just saved that toddler from a ton of unnecessary pain and a scary hospital stay. The takeaway here, structure beats autopilot every single time.
To shift from that faulty autopilot over to structure, we're going to use a 5-step loop. Make explicit, decompose, create focus, evaluate, and scale the effort.
Right here is the visual map of those first 4 foundational rules that are going to replace your failing autopilot. You make it explicit by getting it out of your head. You decompose it by breaking it down. You create focus by targeting what actually matters. And you evaluate by checking your work. Let's dive right into these one by one.
All right, rule 1, make explicit. Get it totally out of your head.
This first rule is absolutely crucial because it's designed to prevent the single costliest mistake in problem solving, perfectly solving the entirely wrong problem. We so often confuse a proposed solution with the actual problem. Like saying we need a new system is a solution. It's not a problem. The real problem is our current system produces 15% errors, and that's costing us 3 hours every day. Think about a marketing team that spent 4 entire months and blew a massive budget on an acquisition campaign, all because they just assumed they needed new customers. Well, acquisition went up 8%, but their revenue just kept dropping. Why? Because they never actually explicitly defined the problem. When they finally stopped and looked at the data, the real problem was that existing customers were churning way faster than the new ones were even arriving. 4 months of work totally wasted because they perfectly solved the wrong problem. Always state the what and the why clearly on paper before you do anything else.
Okay, moving to rule 2, decompose. Basically, divide and conquer.
So once you actually have the right problem, it is often still way too big to tackle all at once. Imagine a manager walking into her office on a Monday, and the CEO has just vaguely demanded, "We need to fix our culture." She's staring at a blank page, completely paralyzed. This right here is the complexity trap. Culture touches literally everything. Where do you even begin? Well, she has to break it down. And we do that using something called the Mies principle. Mies stands for mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive, which is just a fancy way of saying break the big problem down into smaller chunks with absolutely no overlaps so people aren't doing the same work twice, and no gaps, so nothing slips through the cracks. But watch out, there's a trap here too. Breaking things apart is only half the job. You have to plan exactly how they reconnect using what we call integration contracts. It's like a homeowner doing a renovation, right? The electrician runs all the wiring perfectly on one wall. The interior designer centers the beautiful new layout on the opposite wall. They both did their jobs flawlessly in isolation. But then you go to hang the TV and the electrical plug is on the wrong side of the room. A simple integration contract, just asking, hey, where will these pieces actually meet before you start, prevents all that disastrous rework.
Which brings us to Rule 3. Create focus. Focus on what actually matters. This is how we fight the efficiency trap. That illusion that working on everything all at once makes you super productive. Imagine a product team desperately wanting to improve user experience, so they open up 5 completely separate work streams. Over 6 weeks, they crawl to like 40% completion on all 5 of them. The result? They delivered absolutely nothing to their users. Spreading yourself thin doesn't break anything, only concentrated energy creates a breakthrough. So how do we choose what gets our focus? We use tools like the classic 80-20 rule. That tells us that roughly 80% of our results come from just 20% of our causes. We've got to strip away all the noise, only track the essential KPIs. Or, if you're looking at a whole system, find the one bottleneck. A plant manager once noticed his entire factory was missing targets, even though every single station looked incredibly busy. But the reality, dozens of parts were just queuing up at one single outdated machine. Every other station was literally just waiting on that one machine. Optimizing that one bottleneck, instead of trying to fix the whole factory at once, was the only way to actually boost their output.
But hey, quick word of warning here about focus and simplifying. The writer G.K. Chesterton famously warned about encountering a fence across a path. He said, do not remove it until you understand exactly why it was built in the first place. There was a new manager at a chemical plant who decided to streamline their maintenance by ripping out a pressure relief valve because, honestly, it looked completely redundant. What he didn't know was that it was installed years ago after a near-fatal pressure buildup. Well, without that valve, the exact same failure happened again, and the resulting explosion shut the entire plant down for 6 weeks. So please, understand what a piece of complexity is actually protecting before you go cutting it in the name of focus.
All right, Rule 4. Evaluate. You got to check your work.
This rule is all about combating the rework trap. And listen carefully to this. No amount of careful execution can ever fix a wrong starting point. The stakes for skipping this can be absolutely terrifying. Take the 2017 Eindhoven parking garage collapse. Just a month before the building was supposed to be finished, the entire top floor collapsed, bringing 3 other floors crashing down with it. The cause? Months earlier, a draftsman rotated the floor slabs on a drawing by just a simple quarter turn. It took him minutes to do, but those connections were never actually checked against the structural load requirements. It was a massive disaster, and it was completely preventable by just a single, simple check of the plans before construction ever began.
Because of that, we must constantly run this short evaluation loop. It's 4 parts. 1. State your claim. 2. State your expectation. 3. Test it against reality. 4. Decide whether to proceed, adjust, or stop entirely. And this isn't just something you slap on at the end of a project. You need checks at every single stage and strict quality gates at major transitions. The question at any quality gate is always, are we truly ready to proceed? That is exactly how we catch confident but totally wrong work before it ever ships out the door.
And finally, Rule 5. Scale the effort. This is all about reversibility.
Now, I know exactly what you're thinking. Running this rigorous 4-step loop for every single minor decision sounds absolutely exhausting. And you're totally right. It would be. That is why we calibrate our effort based on reversibility. It's a great metaphor popularized by Jeff Bezos. He says decisions are either one-way doors or two-way doors. Think about buying a house or designing a skyscraper. That's a one-way door, right? Once you walk through, you can't easily just walk back. For those, yes, apply the 4 rules with maximum rigor. But exploring a new career path or testing a new software tool, that's a two-way door. If it doesn't work out, it's pretty easy to just reverse course. For two-way doors, you just apply light rigor. You still run through the 4 rules for sure, but maybe it just takes a 2-minute mental check or a quick chat with a coworker. The biggest trap is bringing heavy one-way door rigor to a simple two-way door decision, which just ends up wasting everyone's time.
So, let's bring this all full circle. Back to where we started. What is keeping you awake at 3 a.m. right now? What is that specific problem where your autopilot has just completely failed you? I want to challenge you today, don't just stare at the ceiling again tonight. Take that exact problem, pull out a physical piece of paper, and run it through these 4 rules. Make it explicit, decompose it, create focus, and then evaluate your next step. Because honestly, what if the reason you're so stuck isn't that the problem is unsolvable? What if you've just been relying on an autopilot that was never ever meant to fly in this storm?